μέρους του Κέντρου Στήριξης Μη Κυβερνητικών Οργανώσεων. Θα ήθελα να σας καλωσορίσω στην σημερινή εκδήλωση και να σας ευχαριστήσω για τη συμμετοχή σας. Το Κέντρο Στήριξης Μη Κυβερνητικών Οργανώσεων ιδρύθηκε το 1999 και το όραμά μας είναι μια ισχυρή κοινωνία των πολιτών στην Κύπρο. Προωθούμε την συμμετοχή των πολιτών στα κοινά και την ιδέα του ενεργού πολίτη. Παρέχουμε τεχνική υποστήριξη τόσο για εγγραφή νέων μη κυβερνητικών οργανώσεων, αλλά και για ανάπτυξη διοικητικών και άλλων ικανοτήτων υφισταμένων μη κυβερνητικών οργανώσεων και υποστηρίζουμε ενεργά τη δημιουργία και συμμετοχή σε θεματικά δίκτυα μη κυβερνητικών οργανώσεων στην Κύπρο και στην Ευρώπη. Ως Κέντρο Στήριξης Μη Κυβερνητικών Οργανώσεων θεωρούμε την σημερινή εκδήλωση, η οποία είναι μέρος του προγράμματος JoiEU, στο οποίο συμμετέχουν από 12 χώρες οργανώσεις παρόμοιας φύσεως και στις οποίες θα διοργανωθούν παρόμοιες εκδηλώσεις ανοιχτού διαλόγου για θέματα που απασχολούν τις συγκεκριμένες χώρες. Η σημερινή εκδήλωση είναι πρώτη τάξη ευκαιρία για να αναδειχθεί ο ρόλος και το έργο των οργανώσεων της κοινωνίας των πολιτών εν καιρό οικονομικής κρίσης, αλλά και γενικότερα στην κυπριακή κοινωνία. Παράλληλα, είναι μια ευκαιρία για την ανταλλαγή απόψεων για το πώς μπορούν να ενισχυθούν οι οργανώσεις αυτές, ούτως ώστε να είναι σε θέση να ανταποκριθούν στις ανάγκες της νέας εποχής. Βασική επιδίωξή μας μέσα από αυτή τη συζήτηση, αλλά και γενικότερα από τις δράσεις και το έργο μας ως κέντρο, είναι να συνεισφέρουμε στο διάλογο για χάραξη ευρωπαϊκής πολιτικής και να δημιουργηθεί μια κουλτούρα συμμετοχής. Είναι σημαντικό οι πολίτες να συμμετέχουν στα κοινά, είτε ατομικά είτε μέσω της συμμετοχής τους σε οργανώσεις της κοινωνίας των πολιτών. Έχουμε εμπειρίες και γνώσεις και μπορούμε και πρέπει να έχουμε ενεργό ρόλο στο διάλογο για χάραξη πολιτικής για την επίλυση των προβλημάτων που αντιμετωπίζει η κυπριακή κοινωνία σε οικονομικό, κοινωνικό και πολιτικό επίπεδο. Ολοκληρώνοντας, θα ήθελα να εκφράσω ιδιαίτερες ευχαριστίες στους ομιλητές για την αποδοχή της πρόσκλησής μας για τη συμμετοχή στη σημερινή εκδήλωση και στο Γραφείο του Ευρωπαϊκού Κοινοβουλίου στην Κύπρο για τη συνεργασία. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Good morning. I would like to welcome you to the EU House, the House of European Citizens here in Cyprus. It is a very great joy that we cooperate with you, with the NGO Support Center, the NGO Support Center, and we are very happy to cooperate with you. And we cooperate a number of issues, and we do believe that it is extremely important for the civil society to be empowered because it's a very important part, and I would say the most important part for democratization, and not only that, but also for changes that we want to bring about in order to have a modern society, in order to have a society which gives or makes every effort possible in order for this society to stop to manage things only via political decisions. Therefore, it is extremely important for citizens to be involved in this process. The European Parliament believes that the citizens are at the center, at the epicenter, at the core of this democratic procedure, and that is why last year was devoted and was citizens here. It is our very great joy to host this event here at the EU House, and I wish you the best deliberations. And I wish that the civil society in Cyprus can stand up and can face this crisis, the economic crisis, and become stronger. Thank you. And I would like to welcome you. We're going to start now our discussion. First of all, please allow me to welcome you on this debate, civil society and the economic crisis and other crises that you are facing as the outcome of the economic crisis. We have here with us Elana Ioannou, who is the representative of public relations and communications of the youth world. Mr. Baristian is the president of the University of Nicosia, and these three are going to be our speakers for the first debate, civil society amidst the economic crisis, and George Francis, representative of Red Cross Cyprus, and Nikos Peristianis, the president of the Council of the University of Nicosia, and Mrs. Elada Ioannou, the press officer for the Cyprus Youth Council, who would like to make a presentation from the podium. Good morning. My name is Elada Ioannou. I'm the press officer and communication officer for the Cyprus Youth Council. On behalf of the Cyprus Youth Council, I would like to thank the organizers for addressing us the invitation to participate at this debate, and I would like to congratulate them for their initiative to organize this debate. As the Cyprus Youth Council, we are trying and to be always by and supporting young people, and through our actions and programs, our wish is to provide education and also voice to our young people. And our objective is to help young people to have an active role and to be involved in what is happening around them, and of course to help them to tackle the various problems they are facing and also the difficulties that they have in order to adjust to the society, which could become very competitive. Of course, as the Cyprus Youth Council, we couldn't stay passive because this is the main problem faced by young people nowadays. I have a problem with my slides. Yes, young people today, we are the main victims of the economic crisis which is suffered by our country, and therefore the Cyprus Youth Council has set as one of its priorities campaign against unemployment amongst young people. And please allow me, before I proceed with the presentation of the action of the Council to how we face this crisis, this unemployment, I would like to present and to explain what is the Cyprus Youth Council, because there is a confusion between our council and the Cyprus Youth Board. So our council was set up in 1996, and it is the forum representing NGOs. You have 55 organizations, and we have the participation of all youth organizations, of political parties, of students, pupils, trade union organizations, agricultural organizations, Turkish Cypriot organizations, religious minorities, and many other youth organizations which are promoting a wide spectrum of issues faced by young people. The Council works as the coordinating body and as representing Cyprus and young people to international fora. The objective of the Cyprus Youth Council is to promote dialogue and communication amongst NGOs, youth NGOs, and we try to provide a representative framework for organizations, for the member organizations, in order to develop initiatives, implement actions, exchange of information, experiences, and develop a dialogue on issues which concern young people, the development of the European conscience amongst the young people in Cyprus, to empower young people to participate in the political, cultural life and active citizenship, the promotion of recognition of youth NGOs, and the non-official education and promoting participation of young people on issues which are of interest to them, and promoting policies for young people. As I said before, recognizing that the main problem faced by young people here in Cyprus nowadays is unemployment, the Cyprus Youth Council started as of 2012 the campaign An Active Unemployed Young Man or Woman. So trying to register or promote the voices of those who are immediately affected by the crisis, to say, ask the young people through a number of actions and events. So the campaign aims on informing and making the society aware of the existing situation, promoting at the same time a number of proposals in order to tackle the problem of unemployment. So the first event, which was organized in the context of this campaign, was the open dialogue with young people. And at this event, the 13th of September 2012, we invited young people, and the results of this helped us to shape the document for facing unemployment amongst young people. Then the first one was the 20th of June 2012, the second one the 13th of September 2012, open dialogue with young people. And we invited the Dean of the University of Cyprus and also Mrs. Eskevi Koukouma, who is MP for Akel, and the dialogue at the end, the recommendations were reasons of participation in research, and all this all the above has been taken into account in order to set up a program. 19th of September 2012, the Cyprus Youth Council invited representatives from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, which presented special programs for young people. 13th of December 2012, we organized another event with the topic the future of Cyprus, the professional future of Cyprus. So we had a presentation of new opportunities, professional opportunities in the context of green development and growth and natural gas, and we had representatives and invited people working with the ANATH, which is the Authority for Human Resources Development. February 2013, we had another event, the list of appointed teachers, educators, and the speakers at the time were the Minister of Education and Culture, George Demosthenou, representatives of trade union organizations, President of BOFEN, OELMEC, and POED. March 2013, we had a special seminar on unemployment, and we invited various youth organizations in order to discuss the policy document on the unemployment of youth people. June 2013. We organized the 6th Summer Academy of the Council, where we had the participation of over 60 young people. This the academy, the Summer Academy, had as a topic an active but unemployed young man or woman, and we discussed these various opinions, NGOs, and we had representatives of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, and also representatives from the Human Resources Development Agency, and we had also a presentation by the Commissioner for Volunteerism, Mr. Yannis Yanakis, and during this school or academy, a summer academy, discussed opportunities which are provided to young people by the European Union and how we can promote also active citizenship. Between the 25th of June and 1st of July 2013, we've organized with a lot of success and completed with a lot of success the European Congress of the Cyprus Youth Council, Active Youth Against Unemployment, and we had the participation of 20 young people from Cyprus. We had from Greece, Italy, Spain, Malta, Spain. So through the techniques and technology, and in combination with the presentations by national experts, by the Human Resources Development Agency, by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, the participants developed and analyzed the problem of unemployment at the local and European level. And we concluded this Congress, this seminar, with a number of recommendations, and the Cyprus Youth Council sent these recommendations to all the competent authorities in order to include them in the decision-making process. 5th of October 2013, the General Meeting of the Council adopted and approved the policy document on how to tackle and face unemployment and also professional orientation guidance, professional guidance. And also in October, we decided to prepare an information leaflet on the rights of youth. And I would like to declare that you're very close to and complete this leaflet, and this document could be a very important document for young people who are entering nowadays the labor market in Cyprus. So in November 2013, the Cyprus Youth Council participated in public consultations which take place in the context of preparing the policy document on young people, in the context of the National Plan Guarantee for Young People, the Youth Guarantee. And before we proceeded with consultations, we asked from all our members their opinion, their concerns, their expectations, in order to be able and express them via the Cyprus Youth Council. And in this case as well, the Cyprus Youth Council asked a priori from our members their opinions, and we presented these members and we promoted these to the competent authorities. In December 2013, we had organized a European program, or the title was "The Effect of Financial Crisis on Youth," and we had the participation of 15 young people from countries facing the highest unemployment rate amongst the youth, such as Greece, Spain, Portugal. Of course, we had Cypriot young people who participated at this seminar. Between December 2013 and January 2014, we had public consultations in the context of the Greek presidency of the Council of the European Union, and the title was Youth Entrepreneurship. To date, we had public consultations in Paphos, Limassol, and Agros, and we have to add that there is an electronic questionnaire, an online questionnaire, which gives the opportunity to young people to express their opinion on unemployment and youth entrepreneurship. And I would like to add that by replying to this questionnaire, we give the opportunity to every young people to be selected as a member of a Cyprus mission, which will represent Cyprus at the European Youth Congress in Salonika in March. So what you have now is what you call the Winter Academy, or the Winter School of the Cyprus Youth Council, and the topic is Youth Entrepreneurship Against Fighting Unemployment, which will take place between 7th to 9th February 2014 in Agros. The objective of this Winter Academy is to give the chance to young people to exchange opinions through interactive methods, to develop new ideas, solutions, and synergies amongst all member organizations of the Cyprus Youth Council on this topic. And any other information, if you need any other information, you could find it on the web site of our Cyprus Youth Council, and the participants should be between the age of 18 to 30. They should be actively participants of the Cyprus Youth Council, and they have to represent a youth organization member of the CYC. So in closing, I would like to add that the CYC participates actively in a number of seminars here in Cyprus and abroad with the topic of youth unemployment. Now, the general meeting of the CYC, which was convened 2013 in March, and following the campaign on active unemployed young people. So we ended up with a number of proposals, and the objective is this document, a policy document, to help to tackle unemployment. These are presented in the policy document, and in total you have 28 proposals. Indicatively, I would like to say that in this you can find this policy document on the website of the CYC, the Cyprus Youth Council. I would like now to share with you a number of our proposals. Invest in research and innovation, which will be 3% of the GDP of Cyprus, and this in presence with the European Directive on for policies to develop green economy, renewable energy sources, recycling, the management, ecotourism, and management of which will create of waste, and these will contribute to the protection of our environment, further promotion of programs which concern education and employment in the sector of natural gas and energy, upgrading guidance, professional guidance, in order to provide pupils, their parents and students, on the needs of the Cyprus market. We need further recognition and certification of professional qualifications in order to safeguard the various professions on a number of from a number of competent authorities, such as the Human Resources Development Agency. We need certification and recognition of skills, and also we need to upgrade provided programs and plans for ongoing learning and education, and these taking into account the needs of the labor market and also adjustability to the needs of the labor market. We need to promote and make use of European programs for both reasons of growth and also to support young unemployed. And we have proposals in order to use young people in public utilities in order to acquire experience, and in this way young people could acquire the necessary skills. So we have a proposal to promote and encourage youth entrepreneurship with a vision of incentives, including tax incentives and reduction of red tape. And we need also empowerment of NGOs in order to be in place to employ young people. And we need to upgrade the institution of public employment services. At the same time, have to centralize the district offices. We have also to set up a specialized service for young unemployed. We needed to set up the institution of counselors on employment, which inter alia can give us advice on how we can be guided for the future professions, and also more flexibility and simplification of the procedures for the various programs. We have to improve access to information and to labor market, including the possibilities to be employed in other member states of the European Union or even in third countries. We need to reinforce the protection of young employees and workers through informing them on the main labor legislation, and as well as the setting up of the authority for examining complaints, and also grants and subsidies for vocational training. And also we need to organize special professional programs through secondary and tertiary education, and also through the internships. And during internships, you have to secure the protection of young people in order for employers not to take advantage of young people. So we have a proposal in order to fight illegal and undeclared employment, and also to have stricter sanctions on the employers, the modernization of our educational system in order to be easier to go from education to vocational training. We need to modernize our employment and recruitment system and assessment of teachers and educators in order to give the chance to young people to work in this sector. We need also to introduce encouragement policies in order to encourage young people or people with disabilities or those coming from financially or economically vulnerable groups, and to secure also promotion of equality, non-discrimination amongst young women or mother, and to the benefit of unemployed men. So if you want more information, or rather, we would like to say that the CYC, the Cyprus Youth Council, will continue our efforts in order to continue and to find unemployment. So I would like to invite all young people to visit our website to be informed of our programs and events. And we would like to invite young people not to be discouraged by the current economic crisis in our country. On the contrary, they should remain active young people, investing in themselves and thus contributing to the shaping of our future. Maybe as young people we do not have any other choice. We are currently unemployed. However, we can be active at the same time. Thank you very much.
So we're going to go on with the presentations and then have questions afterwards. George Francis from the Red Cross. My name is George Francis. Could the speaker speak closer to the microphone, please? I can't hear him. Because of the efforts we make to tackle the new situation that has arisen because of the crisis. I will speak to you about the new situation and the new needs that have emerged, the amendments, so the changes that we've had to make in the internal operations of our organization, the new programs, amended programs, and new programs that we have set up, the results so far, and of course, the main issue that we must discuss are shortcomings and challenges that we have. Not just we, but many other organizations also. The Cyprus Red Cross, in the crisis, has undergone many challenges, both in the as far as staff is concerned and the mechanisms, this general organizational mechanisms, particularly this year where we're a new full member of the Federation. We had to update our mechanisms, but in the crisis, because of the crisis, we've been on the front line of tackling needs. At the same time, the staff and volunteers of the Red Cross were observers. As you all know, we were watching changes. We watch people getting more and more people who come to the offices are more and more unemployed. We've had an increase of people who are under the poverty line, and as a result, we've found a great increase of psychosocial problems, and at the same time, increase of xenophobia. In order to tackle these new challenges and the new situation, we had to adjust our humanitarian programs and our machineries, I'm going to explain to you, and also to create new programs which respond to the new needs. In order to achieve all this, we had to appoint additional staff, and at the same time, the staff had to be trained suitably by professionals, specialized professionals, through seminars, trainings by professionals both from abroad and Cyprus. And at the same time, we had to specify new. One of the principles governing the International Red Cross movement is volunteerism. And as I am certain that Mr. Yanakis will tell you about later, volunteerism is being promoted on new bases in Cyprus society under a correct approach. And it would be a good thing if we were able to develop this as well. So the Red Cross began a new campaign to attract volunteers through various means. We redefined a model of management of the volunteers, the workforce, if you like, the volunteer force, and organizations, taking experiences from other national organizations of the Red Cross, both as far as volunteerism was concerned, and introducing new methods and tools for practicing voluntary work. At the same time, we began a series of trainings and seminars last April, which are being run by professionals and specialists, both from the International Federation and other Cypriot organizations, giving seminars to our volunteers so that they are able to respond and offer their services in the best possible and most professional way. At the same time, we're making great efforts to create cooperations and reinforce our cooperation with other agencies, both, for example, the Welfare Office, government organizations, and NGOs, such as the NGO Support Center, and work with universities and research centers. At the same time, we try to strengthen information and communication with the public on specific issues, which I will explain later. The new programs are those that we're adjusting are to do with social welfare, old mechanisms and machineries. We're trying to work on them in a specific way so that they come under specific programs and under holistic approaches. With some of these are interviews for people who are applying for help, both with social workers and trained volunteers who have seminars and trainings. We have home visits for people who apply for help. And during those home visits, we observe the situation, we evaluate, and at the same time, we offer psychosocial support up to a point. After that point, if necessary, we also intervene in special advice by experts. The experts could be either psychologists, social workers, and I forgot to say lawyers, doctors, and other agencies, governmental or non-governmental. We also conduct surveys. At the moment, at the informal level, we're trying to modernize the recording of all that the people that we see and all the things that we do. This is done by electronically recording all data, and as you know, we provide humanitarian assistance in kind. We are one of the most important organizations as far as that is concerned, in the provision of food, clothes, and so on. The next program, as you know, we've set up crisis response teams. We have teams ready to provide humanitarian assistance in kind, first aid, blood, and at the same time, we have our stores and warehouses ready to provide assistance. In order to perfect all this, we are in continuous communication both with other Red Cross organizations, which are much more advanced than us, and others, civil defense, for example, and other organizations abroad. Another program, which I'm certain all NGOs have a problem with, is, of course, finding funds. And something we're trying to develop recently is by setting up teams which, apart from organizing collections, they try to find funds in order to make proposals to. Finally, we give emphasis to issues of migration. We recently intervened and came into an agreement with the government for an intervention at the center, the reception center for asylum seekers in Menoia, or the illegal immigrant center, and in Gofino as well, where gradually we're developing a series of actions of psychosocial content. We set up a plan, and we're beginning to implement this plan to do with psychosocial support, workshops for the development of abilities. We give humanitarian help in kind. Soon we're going to begin lessons in Greek, in the Greek language at Menoia. And we have a small team of volunteers for translations. and recreation, which is part of the psychosocial support. We make home visits, and we inform people about their rights and hope that there will be the positive results are quite many in number. We provide psychosocial support to 1,500 people. It could be more, actually, but we're limiting it at the moment. Psychological support so far to 50 individuals through the Cyprus Institute of Psychotherapy. I forgot to say that there's a cooperation with the volunteer doctors of Cyprus, with whom we cooperate and send people who have no access to medical care. And we've had a number of cases which, altogether in cooperation, we turned to the Ministry of Health in very difficult cases for writing off the debts of people who could not possibly pay them. So this is a good cooperation as well. We also have a number of people who take lessons in foreign languages at the European University. And with the European University, we also cooperate with the social workers there. We provide quite a lot of humanitarian assistance. 175 food a month. Monthly, we give large boxes, especially in the holidays, around 7,000 packages. And we have much better trained staff now. Cooperation has increased with external agencies, such as the Commissioner for Volunteerism said. Cooperation is the only way to move forward in Cyprus. And we have increased active volunteers. Finally, and we could discuss this later, of course, the challenges and weaknesses are many. The main ones, in my view, is first the way that those who apply for help are assessed, because in this effort, many organizations take part in this. There's a very serious effort to harmonize criteria, and this effort at the moment is at the initial stages, because each organization has a different philosophy. And I would say that it's quite difficult to achieve this measure, although it's desirable. And afterwards, I'd like to hear your views on this. It needs, we need more improvement of coordinating systems, both at the government level and at the non-governmental level, in order to be able to achieve truly harmonized results. The third is awareness raising and activation of volunteers in humanitarian issues through the correct approach. Recently in Cyprus, words are coming to the surface, such as holistic approach. Many of you know all this jargon. Ways to help us to have active citizens and create dynamics different dynamics than simply the provision of material assistance. And at the same time, we need to work, the great challenge is to work through the media as well, both at the educational level, and we must coordinate as well. And finally, a major issue which we all wonder about is how long the crisis will go on and whether we have enough available resources to keep the situation going. Because as an organization, the Red Cross is seeing the figures rising dramatically. Problems are increasing, both as far as material help is concerned and also psychosocial assistance as well. As an organization, we are not able to cover the needs fully. We do our best, but the figures, the number of people who are asking for help with the powers that we have at our disposal in order to provide assistance is completely disproportionate. And as the numbers grow, there must be better coordination. Something was said off the microphone. Foreign applicants, yes. Thank you. We'll go on now to our next speaker, who is Mr. Beristianis from University of Nicosia. He's going to speak from there. Thank you. I'd like to thank the NGO Support Center also for the invitation, for inviting me to take part in this discussion. In contrast with the other two speakers who represent organizations with great action, particularly in this period, I represent myself as a social worker, and I'd like to give my views from that point of view of sociology, but also a new group of citizens called Politia. And I will explain what Politia is and what it's trying to do, together with other similar groups which have been operating in Cyprus in last years, in view of the crisis, of course, but also before the crisis as well. It is important, since we're talking about civil society, to try to see what are the characteristics of civil society, how they've developed, the organizations of citizens, the participation of citizens, civil organizations, NGOs, how they're different from more traditional forms of organizations, such as political parties, trade unions, and so on. It is important to say that until a few decades ago, one would say a couple of decades ago, a couple of decades after the Second World War, political life in the countries of the West revolved around the existence or the development of industrial societies and the problems that these societies presented. There were various groups, the best known, of course, with representative democracy, with the political parties, but also pressure groups, which usually have one issue, one focus. For example, the Red Cross, groups that are interested in specific groups of citizens and so on. The various political and social movements, like the agricultural movement, the labor movement, and these were the main players in the political life of a society. The main conflicts concerned issues such as redistribution of wealth, access to decision-making centers, and so on. The organizations of citizens concerned civil organizations, or organizations of citizens that concern different things like parties and the unions, they were organized in a rather centralized and inflexible, rigid way, and it was class-based as well. A worker would join a left-wing movement or political party or union. From the 60s onwards, however, new forms of movements began to emerge, new social movements, and these stood apart from earlier movements. For example, how they were organized, their ideology. They tried to criticize the societies, beginning from criticism during the 60s, of course, the youth movement were criticizing these society of plenty, that the old generations were interested mainly in material goods and forgot many other aspects of life, freedom of the individual, self-fulfillment, and so on. So therefore, these movements are meta-industrial or meta-modern, postmodern. A turning point was the development, of course, the 1968 revolution, if you like, or uprising, and more organized forms of these new trends emerged, such as the youth movements, the feminist movement, the ecologists, anti-institutional movements, anarchists, and so on. These movements focus on new issues such as the quality of life, direct democracy, not indirect representative democracy, resistance to social control, support civil society, emphasis on collective identities, specific demands such as closing nuclear factories and plants and so on. These are all precursors of civil organizations that we have the experience of today. In general, there's an emphasis from now on, from the 60s, 70s onwards, on post-material, non-economic values, emphasis on culture, the common risks that humanity faces, nuclear movements against the possible of nuclear war, the use of nuclear arms, and so on. These new movements aim at a more general criticism and modernization in general, progress in the way that progress is achieved in these societies, and more recently, criticism against globalization. There is a distance from utilitarian rationalism which characterizes these societies, and the invasion of politics, technology, and economy, and the red tape in all areas of life in modern developed societies. Usually, these movements emphasize more places of personal autonomy, which people need, far from the influence both of the market and the state. And it's important to recall these things in a couple of minutes, because in Cyprus at the moment, criticism, both for the market or the intervention of the state in economic life, is not as powerful as it was in other societies of the West. New movements characteristically do not seek the conquest of power. Traditional forms of organizations, the aims of a political party is to take power, and through the state, through government, to change what they consider important, to change society. New organizations do not want to do this. And again, as I will say in a minute, the new organizations that I'm discussing have no intention to achieve power or to replace political parties in the political game, but to complement democracy through direct participation, criticism of traditional organizations such as parties, in order to renew democracy. A very important stage in this development of new movements, the new movements I refer to, was in 1989 with the global crisis. After the global crisis, or rather the first stage, is the collapse of socialism, the large movements which brought about this collapse, and more recently, the global economic crisis. An example is the Occupy movement in the United States. This was a clear reaction against the crisis, the fact that there was an increase in America of inequality of wealth between the rich and the poor in the United States, and this movement said that we do not represent the values which were expressed by traditional parties. We're not parties. We're not linked to any party. We don't have a stable political program. We're not interested in taking power. We are against power. We don't have a structure, a permanent structure organization, but the emphasis is against unequal distribution of wealth, unequal distribution of power in society, against the influence of financial interests on government, and the way that policies are specified in the states, and with participation of citizens that they consider more important than any specific demands important for the maintenance of personal freedom. The specific movement had emphasis on occupation as a form of direct action in order to come into conflict with dominant values. These movements, as you know, have often characteristics of the West, Greece. We've seen them in many countries. There have been efforts to create a global basis of these. For example, the protests in Seattle against globalization, or the protests against the G8, the World Economic Forum, and more recently the outraged movement of the outraged, which was a reaction to the indignanti, which was against the problems of the last years. Now, as we come to Cyprus, I would say that until recently in Cyprus, the traditional movements prevailed, political parties, other organizations linked to political parties, or with the church. Many still are linked to these two places, political party and church. But after 2011, and what happened in Mari, some new citizens, civil organizations have been coming up, such as Politia, Eleftheria, and a series of other smaller organizations. And again, characteristic is that they are civil organizations that want to criticize the political events of the country without being interested in becoming political parties or taking part in the sharing of political power. Immediately after the explosion at Mari, if you remember, there was a movement of citizens, a lot gathered outside the presidential palace or elsewhere, and there was powerful criticism against the state, which was not translated into something more permanent. It was mainly expressions of anger against the president and the way that he handled the issue of Mari. There was an expression of indignation, outrage, a criticism of the whole government, and a demand for the resignation of the president, but it developed into a more it did not develop as it had in other countries. But why? Why is this the case? A French social analyst proposes something which could explain why there wasn't anything more effective. Social movements are not, they don't, if you say you have a lot of problems and reactions, it doesn't necessarily mean that this reaction will lead to something more permanent. So going into collective action needs work for how you reproduce things, how you represent things or theorize a problem and promote it outwards. Work. You need language for this indignation. You need to translate your feelings into demands, into proposals and solutions. these demands for a resignation of the president, as happened in Mari, and for the punishment of the guilty are very limiting demands and do not constitute proposals or demands for a total vision of change, and that is why they were not long-lived. It was also important that there was a lack of politicization by many people and an inability to define political goals, which the journalists said they weren't politicized, but in fact they weren't party politicized, or they did not act as members of political parties. What they failed, in my view, to promote is to be political, far from political parties, people who are still active citizens without necessarily being members of political parties. Apart from this weakness of failure in defining some broader goals, a program which will many people together in the creation of a new movement.
There is a number of other places where, these organizations are very difficult to survive. And the topic I referred indirectly because in Cyprus, this is taken by political parties. Because we have many organizations, citizens' organizations are out political parties. For example, women's organizations are very attached, close to political parties. And again, youth movements, they are very close to political parties. Some others are very close to the church. So there isn't any space, in order for new types of citizens' actions to have a place or to be able and gather many people together in order to have an independent presence from traditional political parties and organizations. And another problem are the big changes which exist for many years here in Cyprus and amidst the Cyprus civil society, and they separate Cypriots in any organization. For example, when we had reactions in the case of the Mari explosion, there was a conflict between let's say there was a political nuance, let's say political, when they have problems, or when they have problems, they start discussing the Cyprus problem. They say those who are in favor of a solution, those who are not in favor of solutions, so on and so forth. So I think that these are difficulties which make the survival of these organizations even more difficult. But as I said before, the tension following the explosion of Mari helped in creating new groups of citizens and also other think tanks. One was called Thucydides. So these think tanks were created following the Mari explosion because the citizens thought that even though they didn't belong to political parties, they wanted to belong to other organizations organized amongst the citizens. That is why the effort to set up new organizations in order to have a voice. This was the thought behind it. So this specific group where I participate and I can describe what they try to do, they have as their objective the revival of the political life, and this via the participation of citizens. These are two very important facts, as you say, participation and revival of democracy. So they have their values, but they approach them in a different way. That is to say, they do not believe that they want to replace, as I said, or they want to undermine political parties, but mainly they want to judge political parties in order to upgrade democracy. One principle is the principle of cooperation amongst organizations with similar thoughts and beliefs, and also the issue of transparency of issues having to do with the financing of political parties. Following the recommendations of El Greco, we set up what we call the transparency platform, and this platform has the three organizations, NGOs, which I mentioned before, and they have a common objective. They want to exert pressure until the political parties, they do accept Greco's recommendations. They have to have transparent finances. They should make public their statements and from where they get the money and so on and so forth. So they agreed to work together jointly, and also they agreed on a number of new actions, and every time they agree, they act collectively beyond their separate actions, where they manage to find common points of interest. So another thing is horizontal voting. They started to exert pressure towards this, to change the way of voting. And also they are planning a number of events on horizontal voting now. With regard to the financial crisis, the economic crisis, I have to say that because these new organizations, they were not set up after the financial crisis, but after the Marie explosion, which was a political crisis or a state crisis. That is why these three organizations haven't at the time focused on economic problems. However, we did have, people from these organizations that participated in the public debate on what went wrong vis-à-vis the economic problems and financial problems, and they participated in other efforts, discussions, which took place in order to tackle the problems of unemployment, lectures on a number of issues such as privatization, and this has become a very important issue. However, I would like to add that the contribution of these organizations is not as much, as to propose economic solutions. Of course, this is important too, but their initial effort was to try and change to the best of their abilities, the functioning and the operation of the political organizations here in Cyprus. If we believe that part of the problems which are connected to the economic crisis was due to the fact that they were connected, let's say, to the way that the state was connected, to the banking system. So these things, since these are the reasons of the crisis, the organizations, they do believe that they have to continue and talk about it. They have to continue and exert pressure because this is the root of the problem, and these are the potential solutions that we can give. Now, the economic crisis may help these efforts, for a new policy or a new approach, because of the fact that it weakens the relationship between political parties and the state. So one of the huge problems that we had, the new efforts, political efforts in Cyprus, was the connection to traditional political parties. And why? Because these political parties, they were affecting the lives of the citizens via helping citizens to find jobs, or because they were connected to the state. But nowadays, because there won't be recruitments for a long time, so the political party, how can they affect the lives of the citizens is not that important, nowadays. So it is a huge opportunity, I would say, to make these efforts even more powerful and to reinforce the civil society through organizations which will be independent for political parties. And of course, they are not here just to put an end to the role of traditional organizations, but given these direct or indirect ways, I believe that, personally, I believe that new organizations, citizens' organizations, could contribute to the problems which are being created following the financial crisis, or revising and renewing the political institutions generally. Thank you very much for your attention. Microphone. Microphone. You have to switch off for the one microphone, please. Microphone. You have to switch off one mic and the other microphone. We are going to have very brief interventions by representatives of the civil society from other European countries. And we have at this first round of discussions, Elina Ojisescu, from peer officer about the civil society and the crisis through the Romanian Open Estonian Foundation Majatus on examples of activities following the impact. Andrea Wilsman, I don't know if I pronounce correctly, from the Andrian Institute on Gender Equality, and from Holland. Will speak to us about the crisis and how the crisis affects and what is the role of women. And Darcia Markova from the European Citizen Action Service in Brussels, who is a director who's going to speak about the shaping of measures in order to face the crisis. So the technicians now will undertake.
Hello. Yes, can you hear me? Hello. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Alina Iosifescu. I am representing one of the partners in the JoiEU project, the National Association of Citizens Advice Bureau. First of all, I would like to thank you and congratulate our partners from the NGO Support Center for organizing this event on this very actual topic as regards the civil society in times of crisis. Our organization is a federation of 37 NGOs active throughout Romania, and from this perspective, I will underline some of the ideas regarding the dynamics of the Romanian civil society in times of crisis. To begin with, when I say civil society, I think about the narrow meaning of the term, and that is that of the non-for-profit sector or the non-governmental sector, which in Romania comprises several types of organizations, which are associations, foundations, federations, and unions. When considering the topic of this debate and the extent to which the European and the worldwide crisis affected the NGO sector in the end, I started from the premise that the number of NGOs would actually decrease in Romania during the crisis due to obvious economical reasons that affected each of our countries. However, when checking the available statistical information, what we've discovered was actually high growth in the number of active NGOs in Romania. In this respect, according to a report issued by the Civil Society Foundation in Romania in 2010, based on the data of the National Institute of Statistics, the numbers of NGOs registered in Romania actually increased with 50% in comparison to the previous year in 2008 when the crisis arose. At the same time, if we're looking at the data in between 2010 and 2014, again, a high increase in the number of NGOs can be observed. I mean, in terms of associations, there were more than 10,000 new associations registered in Romania. And in terms of total, the entire sector, the growth was numerical, with more than 12,000 organizations being developed. So when noticing that the initial assumption was actually contradicted by the data, we thought about looking for some explanations. Why is this the case? Why is it possible for that the Romanian NGO sector actually has grown within a time of political and economical crisis? And the explanations that I would like to advance are also based on available data from the report of the Civil Society Foundation. And this regards actually the activities that the NGOs are involved in. Because in Romania, the NGOs are very focused on educational, recreational, and social service type of activities. Again, from a statistic point of view, according to the number of registered organizations, more than 18% of the organizations registered in Romania were tackling recreational activities, 7.5% tackled education, and 7.3% social services. So especially as regards this last part, the social services, the non-governmental sector is a very active one. And I think here is where the explanation for this growth in terms of number of NGOs can be found. Because the non-governmental organizations represent in Romania 49% of the accredited suppliers of social services. Not only in terms of numbers, but also in terms of type of services that the NGO sector provides. There is considerable growth, because the non-profit providers of social services are offering actually around over 7,000 types of social services, which is again more than 50% of the social services offered to citizens in Romania. At the same time, when it comes to child protection, the NGO sector is the one that offers over 25% of the alternative services for child protection. And also, if looking at the numbers, the NGOs serve 41% of the beneficiaries of home care services, and more than 58% of the old people who need these type of services. In terms of funding, it's very interesting to note that these 58% of the organizations actually use their own funding to do so. So with these numbers, I think that it is rather obvious that what is happening in Romania is that the economic crisis constituted a good context for the NGO sector to grow, because it gave it the occasion to serve its purpose, these being mainly, again, educational and social services providers. I only decided to look at the data from the perspective of the economical crisis, because of course, as the speaker before was mentioning, there are very many information that can be tackled in terms of how the political crisis also influenced the civil society sector in Romania, especially when it comes to the organizations active in human rights fields or civil and participation of the citizens. So this was our very short insight on how the economic crisis affected the NGO sector, the civil society in Romania. And I would like to thank you very much for the invite and for your attention. Should there be any questions, I would be very happy to answer through email.
Thank you, Alina. You can give us your email through the screen. I guess you can put it on the message so that the participants can see it. And now we can pass to Marja Toots.
Okay.
Are you next? From the Open
Hello,
Estonia Foundation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So, good day, everybody. I am Marja Toots from the Open Estonia Foundation, which is also a partner organization in the JoiEU joint venture. So, I will not give an overview of the situation at large in Estonia because we haven't done that kind of analysis. But I would be very glad to give you some good examples of civil society projects that we have considered really successful in tackling the effects of the crisis and providing help to those people who were the hardest hit by the crisis. And we are aware of these projects due to the fact that when the crisis first emerged in Estonia, the Open Society Foundations launched its emergency program, which was targeted to helping civil society help their societies get better and to recover from the crisis. So we managed to fund some initiatives who could do that, but no amount of money would have been enough if there hadn't been this initiative and enthusiasm of these civil society organizations. So I will give you a couple of examples of projects that were mainly targeted to middle class or the ordinary people who were a completely new target group for these kinds of services and help, because usually there are NGOs operating with special marginalized groups such as different kinds of minorities. But now, during the economic crisis, what was new was the situation that typical average middle-class people completely found themselves out of jobs, in debt, at risk of losing their homes. So while the government was forced to cut the budgets and could no longer provide for everybody, so the civil society stepped in and started providing services and assistance to people to get them out of the situation. So the examples I'm going to speak about were, as I said, targeted to kind of ordinary people. They were based on voluntary action. That is, people shared their knowledge that they would usually, sell for a payment check on the labor market, but they did it for free to those who needed to make sure that everyone had equal access to knowledge about their rights and ways to protect their rights. The fact that this was a voluntary service also ensured its sustainability. So although our foundation stopped funding these initiatives at one point, we just helped kickstart them. They could continue later on because the people were still there who carried this knowledge and could spread it. And yes, what I think is really important is that they really tackle the problems that were specific to this economic crisis. So the first example is the Estonian Lawyers Association. which has close to 2,000 members of lawyers of different levels and working in different sectors. And they organized 3 sessions of individual legal counseling throughout the country to help people who had fallen into debt or had other kinds of financial or legal difficulties, mostly due to the crisis. So they were advised on ways to overcome their debt, about their rights, about different legal acts, the family law, the law of obligations, employment contracts. They were advised on how to turn to court if they had been, for example, fired for suspicious reasons, or they were advised on how to correctly formulate documents to pursue their rights. And these counseling sessions were given both in Estonian and Russian because a large proportion of our population is Russian speaking. In addition to the lawyers of the association, they also involved specialists and lawyers from the Estonian Unemployment Insurance Fund, which is a government agency. So they could also introduce their services, their training opportunities, and the possibilities to learn to return to the labor market. What was great about this initiative is that they relied completely on local lawyers and specialists who worked on the spot, who knew the local situation, who could work together with local municipality officials. And they also trained the local officials on on things such as debt counseling and support in alimonies. They also managed to start a good media campaign to raise general awareness about the problems that people have and the ways to overcome them. So the media attention was also a key ingredient to their success. And they have managed now to continue their cooperation with lawyers on the spot and with local municipalities and also the Government Employment Insurance Fund. And one more, thing that is, I think, worth mentioning is that normally in Estonia, legal assistance has been kind of considered a privilege for the rich, and it has been virtually inaccessible for an average person or someone who has not that much money. So this initiative could also be seen as a kind of a protest. One impact, in addition to the people who received direct help, was that people actually began to demand their constitutional rights more vocally, and the problems of access to legal assistance were raised more widely in the mainstream media and society. And we're not sure if it was because of that initiative or some other, but in the course of the crisis, also the amount of levies for legal action were lowered by the government, so it facilitated turning to the court for common people as well. So the second example I would like to mention is what the Estonian Homeowners Association did. They also, such as the first initiative, they provided free counseling to housing loan debtors. And as I already mentioned, the economic crisis strongly impacted the middle class, and a lot of them had taken housing loans to buy houses. And when they lost their jobs, they found themselves in a situation where they were pressured by the banks. They had no money to pay off their monthly debt, their loans, and they faced a real risk of losing their houses as the value of their real estate sunk. So what the Homeowners Association did, they provided 3 kinds of free help. They opened a hotline offering free counseling over the phone on what to do to get over the debt situation or to negotiate better conditions with the banks. They provided written advice via email and letters. They also provided individual in-depth counseling at the office if it was needed in specific cases. And in addition to that, they also did some general awareness raising and education. They issued information materials on how to tackle debt, giving advice to people who were already in debt or who planned to take a housing loan to warn them about the consequences. And as a result, and after our funding of the project ended, they have continued giving this free advice, and not only legal advice, but also answering to other kinds of homeowners' worries. And the third project that is kind of from the same strand, or that follows the same principle, is the Union of Apartment Associations. They also provided free advice, but not to individuals, but rather boards of apartment associations. A lot of apartments in Estonia, or a lot of houses, have their own associations to decide on issues that are of common interest or that concern all of the homeowners or people who live in a house. So these apartment associations were advised on how to resolve conflicts that had emerged as the result of having people in debt, not being able to pay their share. And these numbers increased enormously during the crisis. What they did not foresee, but what they adapted to in the course of the project was they started also conciliating problems between the apartment associations and the individual debtors. So they kind of also acted as intermediaries to resolve these conflicts or the difficult situations. They offered group counseling to apartment associations and basically organized full-day training sessions in different towns around the country. And as the first two projects that I mentioned, they also did some general awareness raising and sharing of experience. So they wrote articles about the issue in the media and expanded the general awareness. Well, these were, I think, the three interesting examples for us, although we had tens of different projects that dealt with different target groups in Estonia during when the crisis was most acute. But why I wanted to bring these examples is specifically because of the reasons I mentioned in the beginning, that they did not target any very specific social group that is kind of the usual suspects for civil society action, but they were able to adapt themselves to the situation that had changed and step in where the government could not.
Thank you, Maria. And if you could be so kind and perhaps give us an email in the chat or the website of your association for anyone who wants to learn more. Now we can move to Antia Versema from the Netherlands, right? Antia Versema from the Netherlands, right?
Correct. Thank you very much.
On to you.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of Atria, Institute on Gender Equality and Women's History, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to address the gender aspects of the financial and economic crisis in Europe, and more specific in the Netherlands. First of all, I would like to mention a resolution adopted by the European Parliament last March. The press release sent out afterwards was titled, "Poverty has a female face. Economic crisis hits women hardest." In this resolution, the Parliament concludes that women suffer more than men from the crisis-driven budget and social spending cuts. The unfortunately non-binding advice given by the Parliament in its resolution was, this must be offset by investing in job training and female entrepreneurship. I quote Elisabeth Morin-Chartier, the rapporteur of the Parliament, during the debate. She said, "Women are facing a silent crisis which worsens and weakens their condition. Before the economic crisis, unemployment, precarious work, part-time work, low salaries, slow career paths already affected women more than men. Today, with the effects of the austerity policies, they are suffering a double punishment." With respect to this resolution, Atria analyzed a European report, a pan-European report, called "The Impact of the Economic Crisis on the Situation of Men and Women and Gender Equality Policies." We published this analysis on our website. Unfortunately, for you who don't speak Dutch, it's in Dutch only. And drew some main conclusions for the Netherlands out of this report. The report has 4 main conclusions, and I would like to mention those before I will talk about the Netherlands situation. 1. There has been a leveling down of gender gaps in employment, unemployment, wages, and poverty over the crisis. However, this does not reflect progress in gender equality, as it is based on lower rates of employment, higher rates of unemployment, and reduced earnings for both men and women. In the first year of the crisis, labor market segregation has effectively sheltered women's employment, labor market activity, and pay during the crisis to date. This segregation involves overrepresentation of women in service employment, including the public sector jobs, and underrepresentation in manufacturing, construction, and male-dominated branches of the financial sector. The overall level of segregation in the country associates positively and significantly with the difference in employment losses for men and women. The second conclusion of the report is that the labor market behavior of women over the crisis has been similar to that of men. The traditional view that women behave as employment buffers, called in when demands expand and pushed back when it contracts, has been challenged for the previous crisis, but has been definitely refuted by the experiences of this crisis. The contemporary buffers, however, are young men and women on temporary employment contracts and migrant workers. Thirdly, fiscal consolidation poses a risk for gender equality. The consolidation measures likely to have the most impact on gender equality include wage freezes or wage cuts in the public sector, staffing freezes or personnel cuts in the public sector, pension reforms, cuts and restrictions in care related to benefits, allowances and facilities, reduction of housing benefits or family benefits, tightening of eligibility criteria for unemployment, and assistance benefits or reductions in replacement taxes. The specific impact of fiscal consolidation on gender equality varies considerably among countries in Europe. While in some countries the impact is modest and not consistently pro-inequality, in others, considerably retrenchment in employment, social transfers, and social services may be rolling back past progress. The last conclusion of the report is that the vast majority of countries, gender mainstreaming has not been implemented in policy design and policy implementation over the crisis. Neither recovery nor consolidation measures have been assessed from a gender perspective in all of these cases. So what about the situation in the Netherlands? Last year, the Dutch Statistical Bureau published the latest figures on labor participation of men and women and economic independence. In the Netherlands, 48.5% of all women can be called economically independent, meaning little over half of all women over 15 are economically not independent. They are economically dependent, meaning they do not earn at least 70% of the average minimum wage, which in my country is about 900 euros per month. They earn less or are dependent on their partner, their family, or the government. The good news was this figure shows a slight growth, 0.4%. Good news, meaning more women can call themselves economically independent. However, one has to take into account the effect of the crisis as concluded so clearly in the report I mentioned before. By the end of the first quarter of last year, the labor participation of men in the Netherlands shrunk by 1.6%, and while that of women shrunk with 0.7%. So women did not do better, men did worse. The Dutch Ministry of Gender Equality will start a project to promote economic independence of women over the coming 2 years. Our minister has made this issue one of her key priorities. And Atria, the Institute on Gender Equality and Women's History, the institute I represent here, is one of the advisors to the ministry and to the minister in this project. The European Parliament called for the promotion of entrepreneurship as well in her resolution. Atria asked the University of Rotterdam to write a state-of-the-art paper on female entrepreneurship. The researchers compared existent literature and performed a secondary analysis of available data. In the Netherlands, women are underrepresented as entrepreneurs. Of all women who work, a mere 8.4% is self-employed, and only 2.8% of women can be called entrepreneurs, meaning they lead a business and have employees on their payroll. So these figures will tell you opportunities may lay ahead for women. Atria will publish a fact sheet later this winter, early this spring, about this state-of-the-art paper, in which recommendations for women who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs, as well as policymakers who would like to stimulate women to become so, are written down. I would like to conclude this very short presentation by saying that in general, one can conclude women are not hit so much by the economic crisis, but much more by measures taken by governments to face the crisis. We, as Atria, are advocating governments to use gender mainstreaming tools and gender budgeting analysis to make the effects of policies and measures visible, so they will not hit women harder than men. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Antje. And if you could include an email or a website for your institute for anyone who wants more information. On the chat. An email or a website for your institute for anyone who wants more information.
We will do so. We will do so.
Ah, got it. After this little feedback loop, we can move to Asia. She's gonna talk to us from Brussels, I believe. We can move to Asia.
Maar echt, jij zit vooral zo.
Ja.
Dus jij ziet
Ja.
dat voorhoofd
Ja.
heel goed.
Ja, ja.
Jij zit vooral zo.
Ja.
Asia, you can switch on your mic. Good morning.
Why now?
Yes.
Is
yes.
it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good
morning
from Brussels once again. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this debate. Needless to say, this is one of our favorite projects, the JoiEU project, because it's really a great opportunity to compare experiences on all different topics across countries. It's really, really an amazing project, and we love to participate in each and every debate to the extent possible. With regard to the crisis, my presentation will provide a little bit of a different focus. You know that there have been a couple of measures very important, affecting not only countries but the daily life of the citizens, of all European citizens in all member states, with regard to introducing more budgetary discipline and also remedy some of the effects of the crisis. They have been taken at European level in the last couple of years. And for us, what was very important was to see the extent to which all those measures were consulted with civil society and citizens at large with regard to the necessary and obligatory framework that has to be followed in this respect at European level. Needless to say, you know, that there are certain standards of consultation that are existing at European level. First, Article 11 of the Lisbon Treaty provides that the institutions are obliged to give citizens, as well as representative associations, the opportunity to make known and to publicly exchange their views in all areas of European Union action. Second, the institutions themselves are obliged to maintain an open, transparent, and regular dialogue with representative associations and the civil society, and the European Commission, as the primary initiator of legislation, shall carry out broad consultations with parties concerned. Moreover, there have been adopted minimum standards of consultation, which oblige and provide an obligatory framework of how those consultations should be carried out. They should be clear, concise, and including all necessary information. They have to involve relevant parties in a way as to provide them with opportunity to express their opinion. The consultations should be carried in a way as to provide feedback of what has been taken into consideration in terms of an impact on the policy process and what hasn't been and why. There is a very clearly defined also time frame for the consultations, minimum 8 weeks, and acknowledgement of the contribution. To what extent, however, all these wonderful regulations put on paper have been considered when the crisis began and when the decisions were taken in order to remedy the hard economic situations? First, we have to say a couple of words of what actually this crisis was about. The crisis went through three quite distinctive stages. First, all of us know that it started as a financial economic crisis, but then very soon it moved to the real economy. At the end, it also triggered a sovereign debt crisis. More or less, the response of the European Union in policy terms very much reflected those three distinctive phases of the crisis. What were the actors that participated and took decisions with regard to the policies in order to address the different stages of the crisis? Quite diverse and distinctive actors. First, of course, heads of state. They have taken action, such as the initial bailout of Greece in 2010, for example. Then the Troika, ECB, European Commission, European Monetary Fund. They oversee financial assistance to Greece, to Ireland, to Portugal, to Spain, to Cyprus. National finance ministers. As usual, they are meeting within the format of the Council of Ministers called ECOFIN. So they possess also important powers in terms of economic policy coordination. The same meet in a slightly different, more restricted format, and they convene when they convene in the Eurogroup concerning the Eurozone. In other cases, we have the normal procedure, where the European Commission, as a primary initiator of legislation, together with the Parliament and the Council, co-decides on particular policies or legislation following the ordinary legislative procedure. More or less, in those cases, it's clear that the legislation was initiated by the European Commission. So, what was the EU response to the crisis, and what was the analysis of the level of civil participation there? The EU reaction to the crisis followed the three already mentioned stages of the crisis. The initial emergency response to the crisis, the reforms to the financial and the banking sector, and dealing with the sovereign debt crisis. While the Commission maintained its right to initiate legislations in the first two phases, what has to be very clear is that the third phase of the crisis, dealing with the sovereign debt crisis, was led primarily by the Council, which means heads of state. The initial emergency response to the crisis analysis shows that first there have been really emergency steps taken by the Eurozone leaders at intergovernmental level, and there, of course, there hasn't been any public consultation of the measures. Moreover, the Commission also bypassed this step in certain cases, like, for example, the European Economic Recovery Plan adoption. Even in the cases where there was kind of an attempt to stick to the initial standards, the minimum standards of consultation, they were not regularly met because of limited participation, inadequate feedback provided, as well as much restricted period which went and did not observe the 8 weeks period for consultations. If we have to characterize what has happened during this initial stage in response to the crisis, we may say with one sentence that the arguments to ensure effectiveness of the decision-making process preceded the inclusiveness of the process. Then we move to the second stage, which is financial and banking sector EU response. The analysis of the civic participation here shows that there have been mainly 3 areas of reform. Reform of the banking structure, provisions for the recovery of the banks in crisis, and surveillance of the banking sector. There have been a high level of public consultations on most of those issues carried out. But what is a very distinctive characteristic here is that the consultations has been carried out on a highly technical manner. So technical that actually they prevented citizens and civil society in large in participating. All the questions and the consultations were highly complex, very specialized in nature, resulting in a very limited response, usually from the interest, the industry, and the financial sector itself. So again, the effectiveness prevailed largely. The third phase of the crisis and due response to it, the sovereign debt and deficit level, is characterized by a distant lack of public consultation. Here, in some cases, like the treaty, for example, on stability, coordination and convergence, and individual national bailouts, decisions were taken entirely by heads of state and intergovernmental level. They did not consult the European Parliament, even not to mention civil society. So, by public consultation here have been largely bypassed at the level of policy formulating stage. This leads to a very interesting conclusion. Is this really the case that when we are in crisis, no matter whether it's financial, economic, or any other nature crisis, it's justified to adopt decisions in order to ensure effectiveness and throw out of the window all the rules previously adapted? This is a question that I would like very much being debated by the audience of this debate, because this may not be the last crisis that the European Union will be through. So we have to prepare and to decide how we are dealing with crisis situations. In conclusion, what we can say is that there are at least 4 categories of problems with the public consultations of the financial and economic crisis package reforms adopted at European level. First, the consultations largely have been exclusive, highly technical, provoking interest only on behalf of well-educated and well-prepared stakeholders. Basic questions addressing citizens and taking into consideration their opinion have not been developed. Then the predominant language in which the consultations have been carried out was English. Here even the Ombudsman reacted at European level, recommending that the European Commission is obliged to carry consultations in all official languages. The fact that the consultations were carried out in English, for example, show that there is a systematic lack of responses from Central and Eastern European countries. Then, unclear impact of the consultations. There haven't been any even effort to make an estimate of the impact of even those that responded on the quality of the decisions adopted at the end. And then very low visibility of the consultations themselves. Even in the cases, the rare cases when consultations have been opened and carried out, The very low level of responses from citizens and civil society at large shows that there is a need for higher visibility to be provided. This is from me. I hope I didn't bore you very much with this topic. So I'll be really curious to see what the response from the audience will be. I wish success to the debate further on. Bye.
Thank you very much. If you could add an email, if you can hear me, in the chat for anyone who has any questions. Νομίζω άκουσε εμάς. Έχουμε φίλιο εκτός προγράμματος.
So we've delayed quite a lot because of all the technical issues. It's 11:30. We're going to have a break now. Unfortunately, we won't have time for questions now because we've got to get together for the second half, so we'll